someone, you know, who's had their teeth knocked out, right? And seeing that, we felt very strongly that some of these development areas maybe should not be developed in the way that they had been planned. And since they haven't been yet, you know, could we turn back the clock on those plans a little bit? And that was sort of a delicate question. And I think team members were convinced that the private interests, you know, that had their eyes on those developments would essentially never let that happen. And we had to leave them as is.
Jeff and Belén, I want to thank you. Akash, you've had your hand up for a while. I'll give you the floor for the last question.
Thank you, sir, for the presentation. I just have a very simple question. Like you were referring that the amount of area which is allocated to the streets determines the sustainability, but isn't that dependent upon the zoning laws of a specific city or a country? So how as architects can you influence those zoning laws?
Well, that's a very good question. We are definitely working nowadays here with the administrations to be able to change those laws, a lot of those that are not working. Like Jeff was saying, those laws, existing laws now have driven the design of the city to places that we don't like and that we don't agree, you know, to maybe even a lot of really large streets, for example, but not different scale streets, not a hierarchy of different spaces, but uniformly, like for example, now where there is an intersection in the town, there is a roundabout. There's not, and there are no plazas, for example, right? So there are a lot of things that we want to revert from, and we are doing it through activism and also through the schools of architecture and through trying to influence the architects associations, a lot of public debate, but it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's slowly. I mean, if there's one thing about the pandemic, there's nothing good, but if there's one thing, it is that now in Europe, because of trying to reactivate the economy, the same as in the States, all the money that's coming from the European Union is going to be for sustainable projects, green projects. So that means green mobility and renewable energies in cities. So we are hoping that all these ideas, there's no question that we've made a big jump forward in the last year and a half, in the last year. And there are a lot of more acceptability from society and developers and municipalities for making these changes that are so necessary.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. I know we're over time, but when you ask about zoning, it's an interesting question because we think of zoning typically as, what do we do with the land area that's privately owned and being developed? Do we allow residents? Where do we allow commercial? Where do we allow light industry and so on? You know, our point of view is mixed use is better than monolithic single use zoning. You know, the more essentially, in the interests of creating an active street where opportunities abound for people to have social and economic mobility, you need a lot of doorways. It sounds really simple, but on a single street, you need for there to be a small commerce, a small business, a house, you know, all of the uses, a school, a sports center, you know, a gym, whatever, and restaurants, of course, you know, all of that stuff has to be you know, exactly coexisting, and as much variegation or differentiation of a street front that you can create, the better. But also when I hear the question of zoning and I'm thinking about the streets, I'm thinking about between the wall of one building and the wall of another building, I have a territory, and that territory is zoned also. We have sidewalks, we have bike lanes, we have bus lanes, we have car lanes, right? And there's maybe there's furniture, maybe there's green, there are trees and so on. What we do within that space is also vital. You know, how much of it do we give over to the private car? How much of it do we give over to pedestrians and so on? And how green can we make it? How many benches can we fit in? All those things have to do with the zonification of that swath of public space that is the street. All right,
Jeff, Belén, thank you so much for bringing all these environmental issues to the table in talking about the history of Madrid's development, its growth concentrically, its reliance on different types of infrastructure. Please feel free to stay on with us, but I wanted to make the transition and the connection. Speaking of coexistence, we're doing 2 talks each morning here in New York, each afternoon in Madrid. And the pairings are in some cases accidental, in some cases function entirely of people's schedules. But today was a little bit deliberate. We wanted to kick off both with your projects relating to the train station, relating to the reforestation, the Bosque Metropolitano, but also to hear from Javier, Camy, who's the not only the country director for AECOM, but been in charge for AECOM of Spain and Sweden, and who had previously led the environmental section at AECOM in Madrid for many years. I don't know if you know each other. I didn't think to ask that question in advance, but I encouraged Javier to join us a little bit early. And I will say the same thing. Feel free to stay as long as you're able, because I think some of the discussions of what AECOM is doing in Europe, which we had seen when this field study had gone both to the AECOM offices in Paris and in London and talked about environmental efforts, talked about how infrastructure, both physical and social, relates to environmental imperatives. And Jeff, Belén, you're putting that into a time frame in talking about the transformations over time, not only at Atocha, but around the edges of the city and through the green corridors that you described, I think does relate to the multidisciplinary approach that AECOM is doing in its projects, at similar scale. So Javier, I have a long bio, which I've also transmitted to all the students who are on the in the program and on the call in advance. So I won't read it all, but your background in summary, short summary, includes studies in agronomy. You're an environmental engineer, and you came to be leading AECOM's efforts in Spain through the portal of environmental projects, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that makes for an interesting transition from the prior first kickoff presentation to giving you the floor for the next hour. So thank you, Javier, for joining us.
Great. Just to say goodbye, thank you very much. We do have another meeting in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, well, good to see you both. I wish it were in person, and maybe it will be sometime soon, whether in New York or Madrid. Take care. Bye, Belén. Bye, Jeff.
Well, thank you very much, and hello to my colleagues, and bye-bye, because I have to leave now. No, I really wanted to understand how you want to structure this, because I will introduce myself first. If you want, as you said, you did an introduction. I'm an environmental engineer as background. I've been working for 21 years or so. Of these 21 years, I've been working 18 in AECOM, now in AECOM Spain. So I was part of a legacy company that was acquired by AECOM 10 years ago. For us, it was a huge transformation. We were a very Spanish engineering company, and we were acquired by a multinational that is AECOM that you already know. Probably most of you know that company. And in these 10 years, we transformed our business in Spain at the same time that our cities and our country was also transforming in their infrastructures, developments, and everything. So it was good timing for us to join a multinational. From Spain, we have been very lucky to work in tens of international projects of all kinds. And I will describe you a little bit more about who we are in Spain. I don't want Rick, I don't know, Rick, if you want me to share a presentation or not, or just to explain. Wherever you prefer, I have a presentation also ready. I don't want to waste a lot of time in explaining about AECOM.
We've been doing intensive collaboration with AECOM, not just in our field study, but in New York with a practicum this semester. Many of the graduates of the program are working at AECOM in New York and around the world. And students are very familiar with AECOM and its history. So no, I think that's not necessary. But I would like, yes, to start, if you would, with a presentation, just to make it more visual and make the scale comprehensible. And to do so, I think I may need to make you the host, which I am as we speak. You are now the host.
Okay, let me try to find how to share, because the Zoom platform is new for me. So, okay, I have here the option. Okay, it's quite long, but I will be quite quick because you already know, as you said, you know AECOM for a long time. You in first person, I'm with you. So just wanted to share a presentation for AECOM in Spain, because this is probably new for all of you. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Perfectly.
Okay, so well, about AECOM, I will just jump, because you know what we are, multinational, the first infrastructure firm in the world, and that works in all these fields that you already know. In Spain, we are right now more than 500 employees. The special thing of AECOM Spain is first this international approach that I anticipated. We have been working in international projects since we were acquired 10 years ago, and we have grown a lot thanks to these international projects. We are not limiting our activity to the local market. We have 500 employees that are all based in the same building, which is quite strange at this moment with the COVID, but it was and it is very important for us that we have all the teams together in the same building. So we are not spread across the country. We are almost 90% of this staff is located in the same building in the center of Madrid, by one of the biggest stations that I have heard before, that is the Atocha station. That's where we are located. And the other thing that may make us quite special in the context of Europe is that we have three very balanced teams: civil infrastructure, buildings and places, and environment, that really work together when we are speaking about developments, infrastructures. We have all the teams in environment supporting the first stages, the early stages of any development. We have buildings and places working in architecture, MEP engineers, and so on, together with all the new buildings and developments, architectural developments. And we have a civil infrastructure team that has been working in the last 35 years in developing the biggest infrastructures in our country, including urban infrastructures and country infrastructures like highways, high-speed rail, and this kind of infrastructure. So at the end, the combination of these big teams for an European team, 500 people, is one of the biggest engineering companies in Spain. These three teams are really well balanced and work together in international projects, as I said. So very quickly moving to each of these sections, we have the civil infrastructure, as I said, high-speed rail, we have airports, roads, urban development, everything related to civil infrastructure is managed by this team. with these numbers that you can see here and some areas of expertise. We almost cover everything. And we are working with this team in projects in Canada, for example, like the REM, that is a tram project that is a new infrastructure that is key for the country. And we are working with our Canadian colleagues on that project. We are working in Europe, for example, in the HS2 project in the UK with our colleagues in the UK. We are working in Australia. From Spain, we are working in many locations together with our colleagues in AECOM. And we have some examples here that I will not stop and spend a lot of time on them. We have all the innovation focused in our digital tools. BEAM is something that we delivered our first project in BEAM 10 years ago when it was starting. So we are really experts on BEAM. And this is one project where we are applying these BEAM tools to the transformation of the railways administration itself. The full Spanish railways administration, ADIF, is transforming the way they work and implementing BEAM, and we are supporting them in this implementation and definition of this strategy in Spain. We worked in the integration. You can see this picture is quite easy to understand how complex it is to integrate the high-speed rail station in the middle of a city like Barcelona. This is the picture where we work. This station is still under construction and will be finished soon. But this means how complex can this be in the context of a big and old city like Madrid in this case, but this picture is from Barcelona. In buildings and places, we have interior design experts that have worked in projects like Accenture office or Sony Music office and other offices working in the workplace strategy and interior design. We have worked in architectural projects like the Santander Bank offices in Germany, in Mönchengladbach. And we have other references in the infrastructure field where they were really together with the civil infrastructure teams, like this Kuwait Terminal Airport, Terminal 4, that was designed and built in less than 3 years. All the process was covered in less than 3 years. That was a success for this client. As we said, BEAM is integrated in everything we do. And we have another piece that is where I'm coming from, but now covering the wider scope. It's environment and sustainability. In environment, we are among the 2-3 best reputed companies in soil and groundwater remediation. We have the biggest team by far in that in Madrid, located in Madrid, that has an excellent reputation. So when a client has a problem, a real problem, they come to us and ask our consultancy in remediation, our remediation techniques, innovation, and so on. And we are working with industrial clients, with oil and gas clients, energy companies in these kind of projects that are at the end needed, not only because there are regulations that make them protect the environment, but also because their own policies of these multinationals means that they want to protect the environment and ensure that there's no contamination that is on them for the future. So in environment, we cover almost all the range of services, impact assessment and permitting, as I said, remediation. We do marine surveys. We do also water quality, and we have specific teams. We have boats, and we have specific equipment to go and monitor the quality of the waters. And we have some references here related to hydropower plants or to nuclear plants in the water that they use, or also related to airports and the interaction between birds and aircrafts. That's a very interesting project that we have in 27 airports across the country with the airports administration. And this that looks like Mars or something like that, but that's in the north of Spain, a location that is contaminated by Lindan, and we have been working there for more than 10 years in the remediation of the area. So and everything covered by the care, the culture of care, and the health and safety approach that AECOM is putting in everything we do. We try in Spain to integrate all these services. I mean, when there's a need, a client has a need, the need has always components in environment, components in civil infrastructures, and many times also in buildings and places. You can have a land that has a contamination that has to be transferred to another tenant, and they want to develop something there. So we can provide this client with all the process from the beginning to the construction. So that's, we don't build. AECOM, as you know, probably know, AECOM is not a contractor in Europe, but we control everything from the concept to the work supervision and works management. So I don't want to waste more time or to spend more time in presenting AECOM Spain. We also do things for the community. We work, for example, there's I'm not sure what you have heard before, but there's an area in the east south of Spain that has to be developed in the future, and that it will grow, and new big neighborhoods will be created there. That is crossed by an old cattle trail that was occupied by a lot of buildings and all types of facilities decades ago, and there are very poor people working there. So we are trying to help them together with working with the town halls to ensure that this area somehow is transformed into the city that at the end that is very close to Madrid. So, and we are working then to help the people in need to have the basic needs covered. So that's AECOM. So I will stop sharing if I find how to do that, because now, okay, here. Excellent. So that's in a nutshell what's AECOM in Madrid. So I also prepared a very short presentation about Madrid. It was a very quick one. I'm not sure if everything has been already said by the team, the other team in Spain, but it was just a couple of slides summarizing what's Madrid in terms of the city and what's the transformation that Madrid experienced in the last years, and what's the future for Madrid. So if you want,
yes, please do share those, because I think everyone's perspective is developing. Most of us do not know Madrid very well, if at all. I've been there only a long time ago, and getting a historical perspective is also in the eye of the presenter.
So it's not very detailed, I have to be honest. It's just material to comment about. So what I tried is to bring some numbers, just if you don't know the size of or how is our city is 3 million population. The second in Spain is Barcelona with 1.6 million, so it's the largest also urban area in Spain, with 7 million population in what we call the metropolitan area. So it's the density of the city is 5,400 population per square kilometer. When you have to consider that the country has a number that is 93, so it's really dense. And if we compare with other cities in Europe, we are amongst the most dense cities, and that's probably part of the age of a city like Madrid that was not fully transformed as Barcelona, for example. Madrid has been historically quite similar in the center, and big changes have happened, especially in the suburbs. So the center is quite stable. There's no growth since the 1970s, and the majority of the growth is happening around in the suburbs. Madrid is quite a special city because only half of the population was born in Madrid, which is quite interesting. It's very difficult to be in a meeting in Madrid and everybody was born in Madrid. That's the reality of our city. and the average of the population is 43 years old. So it's not a very young city, but it's a city that is attracting business right now. The business area moved from the center, where the limitations of the buildings and the areas was clear, to the north, and along the Castellana Avenue, that is the longest. Well, it's not the longest, but it's the main spine that crosses the city from north to the south. And the north is really growing in terms of business. And I'm not sure if you have heard already about the development that is going to happen in the north, but I will refer to it later on. Madrid has been stable in terms of politics, and that's important. If we compare with other cities like Barcelona, there's a lot of distraction or noise around politics in regions like Catalonia, and that's impacting a city like Barcelona in terms of attracting business or stability or this kind of decisions where companies wants to establish in cities. Madrid is providing or showing an image of stability and attraction, also due to the low taxes that they are offering in comparison with other regions. So the reality right now is that Madrid is attracting a lot of businesses, and it's a city that is really active. Also, the way they are managing the COVID situation is different than other cities, probably more risky, I don't know, but it's balancing health and economy with a more open strategy, which is, as I said, probably more risky sometimes, but is helping the businesses in Madrid to survive and even to grow. The tourism is concentrated in the center mainly. There are other parts of the city, but the majority of the routes, the tourist routes, are in the city core. So it's not probably the best place to have business buildings. But as I said, some areas were created around that. And it has great connections to historic cities like Toledo, Cuenca, Segovia, Salamanca, all small cities, medieval cities normally, with a lot of attraction for tourism that are really well connected with Madrid by different means that I will explain later. So let's move to the next one. So I tried to put here some information about transportation. In terms of roads, Madrid has 4 ring roads. That's really important because it's similar to big cities like Beijing. 4 ring roads is quite a lot. So M30 is the closest one to the center, and it was placed underground partially, but quite a big proportion of it was placed underground in 2007. That really transformed the city in that area. Now we have the longest urban motorway tunnel system in Europe, and that's really a success. It was very controversial at that time. The city spent a lot of money in doing that. The works took 3 years only. It was quite quick. But the reality is that these works transformed the city in the area of the river, and it was given back a lot of space for the people to enjoy, and cars were put underground, reducing travel time and also providing Madrid with greener areas in that place. I think it was a very important action that, as I said, was difficult to defend at some times because it was really expensive, but we are enjoying that. And there are plans in the north to replicate what we did in the south with similar tunnels, but in the north of the city. The metro system, public transport in Madrid is key. You are probably living in cities all around the world, and there are cities where public transport is not so well developed, where cars are the main mean of transportation. In Madrid, the public transportation is created to ensure that people is trying not to use the car. We are not achieving our goals yet. Many cars, traffic jams still there, but there are a lot of connections and systems that ensure that you have public transport to reach the center. So we have 15 metro lines, 300 kilometers, 300 stations. That is less than a century, well, around a century is the age that they have now. But I would say that in comparison with other cities in Europe, it's still quite modern. Capacity is quite to the limit right now, but it's still working with not so many interruptions. They are still expanding the network, but especially from 1998 is when they did the biggest extensions of the metro network. One interesting thing to mention with regards to the metro is that in the past, we were creating neighborhoods before, and then the metro was taken to the neighborhood. The strategy in the last decades was the opposite way around. First transport, and then the neighborhoods. That means that those neighborhoods were attractive just because they were well connected, instead of waiting to have the neighborhoods to plan the transport. I think it was the strategy that was followed in the last neighborhoods that were created or developed in Madrid, and it was the right one. Also, Madrid has, because of its location in the country, has high-speed train connections. We in Spain have the second longest high-speed rail network in the world after China, and being a much smaller country, of course. And thanks to the high-speed train, you can travel from Madrid to Barcelona in less than 3 hours. It's 620 kilometers, or to Valencia in 1 hour and a half, or to Seville in 2 hours and a half. That's really something that is also helping and helping these other cities, big cities in Spain, to be more active also in the businesses and in the connection with other cities. But for Madrid, it means that it has excellent connections with the other big cities in the country. And we have the biggest airport in Spain, that is the Barajas International Airport, that of course before COVID was moving 61 million passengers a year, which is among the top 5 in Europe, and was also showing that the economy in Spain, not only in Madrid, but in all the country, was led by the tourism. And that's something that we have been impacted in the last 2 years due to the COVID situation. So if we speak about, well, you can see here the network, the metro network, the commuter trains that we have, sorry, it went back. We have also commuter trains to connect those suburbs that are not linked thanks to with metro. We have also a long network of commuter trains that has to be upgraded and expanded in the future. But that means that people living 50 kilometers far from the center can be in half an hour in the center if they are close to a station. And that's complementary with the metro. So if we speak about new developments, Madrid will host the largest urban regeneration project in Europe. I'm not sure, Rick, if you have already discussed or speak about that.
This is a very good.
It's a great development. It has been. It took around 20 years to get approvals of this project. Every single time, well, approvals in Spain are quite complex, but it means in a huge development like this, means approval from the town hall, from the region, and from the government, the state, the country. It was really difficult to put everybody in agreement for the final development, but the reality is that now all approvals have been granted. And this transformation of the city will, at the end, close a big bridge that the city has in the north because of the railways lines that are crossing the city to the north. So everything, all the railway lines will be underground. You can see here in the picture up right, there's an Estación de Chamartín is a big station that already exists in the north but need an upgrade. So there's a project already launched by the Railways Administration that will transform that city in a commercial and transportation hub. All the tracks will be underground. There will have buildings there, office buildings, and also commercial areas. It will be the start of the transformation of the whole area. So this project has been already launched, but there will be others to come for all types of facilities, buildings, type of areas, uses. You can see a model down to the left. Only these 4 towers that you can see in the up part of the picture exist right now. The rest is all new. Only the 4 towers, 5 now, because there's a slim one that is new, are existing right now. The rest will be new. And that will mean work for 20 years, the transformation of a city, and where all the designers are trying to anticipate what will happen in a city in 20 years. When they started planning about this project, it was impossible to think about electric vehicles or this kind of hydrogen. Now, 20 years after the first concept, we have to integrate everything in this design, because this will mean work for 20 years. So we cannot create something that is already old-fashioned when it started to be used. So we are trying to plan, to anticipate what will be the future of the city, and that has to be done together with the authorities that will be, and also the owners of the land that will be managing all this process during the last 20 years. So we have other areas that are even bigger in Madrid, but are perhaps not so visible. That is this picture in the right-hand side, is the Valdecarros development. That is mainly residential. Of course, it combines a lot of uses, not only residential, but it's mainly part of these suburbs that I mentioned that are growing in Madrid. And that will mean different phases, as you can see in this map, and the size of this development will be huge. So the future of our city is to continue transforming the city. These projects will progress, and we will see a transformation also in other areas of the city, where in the past perhaps we were seeing too many cars. Now the concept is, what can we do with the cars to avoid them to be in the center? There are initiatives by the town hall related to that. For example, very recently, or in the last year, it was created like a special protection area in the center with restrictions for the cars, depending on if you are a resident or not, the type of vehicle, the emissions that you have, you can access or not, like in other cities in Europe. And everything is trying to ensure that the city is perfect for the inhabitants, not for the cars. That's the aim of the, I would say, for the biggest cities in Europe. So everybody wants to do the same, is to remove cars from the cities and try to make enjoyable spaces for the population to use. So that's the presentation that I had. And I don't know if you have questions or you want me to expand on something, or.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for an excellent presentation, putting historical perspective in terms of both physical infrastructure and how a city has transformed itself over time, and what are the conditions, not just in regard to stability and investment, but what are the cultural conditions that allow for expansion. We've been reading about Madrid Nueva Norte, but seeing the scale of it and hearing your description is very important. I have a host of questions. I have many questions, but I'd like, in deference to all the students who are participating today, to first ask for their response and questions for you. And then I'll come back maybe to conclude with you after that. Questions from those listening in from afar. Let me get to a different view so I could see hands raised, gallery view. I don't see hands raised, so I'll start with my questions, and we'll shift gears as we go along. I think what was interesting in terms of these being our first two presentations today as an introduction to the city was the focus on how environmental concerns have risen to the fore, and I'm sensing in both what you've presented just now, Javier, and what Belén and Jeff were presenting before, that both culturally and politically, there's a sense of urgency. We heard the discussions and, coming out of Glasgow of the need for, action now and change perception about the car and certainly about natural vegetation. You had touched on something that Jeff and Belén did before, which was both the passageways for livestock that had taken on different uses over time, and how issues of unofficial settlement and uses needed to be addressed without necessarily complete displacement, but with attention to where people live when they cannot necessarily afford to live close to the center of the city. I think, Javier, what your presentation helped me understand better was the linkage of public transit system, which is, in comparing Madrid and New York and why not, is driver of where people can live and still be able to get to work, get to school in a reasonable amount of time. I think the biggest difference is seeing in both presentations the importance of high-speed rail and regional connectivity. The distances, when I was first in Spain, when I was 19, I tried to hitchhike from Burgos to Madrid. I had very long hair and there was guardias civil everywhere. I took the train instead, and it was very easy, but rather slow back then. That would have been, I don't even want to think about how long that was ago. It was a long time ago. AECOM is involved with all of these transformations, it seems to me. You weren't talking idly about things that other people are doing. What's AECOM's involvement now in Madrid Nueva Norte?
Yeah, we are, as I said, the first project to be launched there was by the Railways Administration, is the ADIF, is the Railways Administration in Spain. And they started with the station that is named to be iconic in the city. In fact, they started with a quite long process in which they started with a pre-qualification. They shortlisted 10 different groups out of, I don't know how many proposals they received, but they shortlisted 10 groups, including AECOM. So now what we expect is to start with this next phase, that is to bid for the design and a framework agreement that is for 10 years. So what this client is expecting us to do is not only to design the station, but also to work with them during 10 years in ensuring that we develop all the projects that are associated to that new station. That will be the real start of the development in the north. It has been delayed. I don't know if COVID has had something to do with that, the reality is that we expect this to continue right now in January or February, the latest. There are big and solid groups bidding for that. All of them or most of them are including a star architect in their teams. So this ones is as being a railways administration, they want a station first. I mean, they want trains to pass through the station, to stop in the station, and to be a useful station. But at the same time, they want they understand that this has to be an iconic building in the middle of the huge development. So we are working there with them, and associated with that project, there are also small preliminary activities that the developer of the land is starting to do with regards to water facilities or to strategies, for example, for mobility. They are also starting to understand what should be the strategy for mobility in that area, because it's not clear. As I said, they started thinking about this development 20 years ago. And now we are planning for something that should be still working in 20 years. So they are launching some strategies, and we are working with them in some of them. And at the same time, we work in other projects with this railways administration in the integration of these railways lines in the city, in Madrid, because the other development that I mentioned in Valdecarros is also over railway lines that have to be underground in the future. So I think AECOM, what is showing to them is that we can provide them with all the angles, the architectural angle, and also the civil and the environmental. For a city like Madrid, the environmental component is key. Contamination is a problem always in big cities. So they are really working in different strategies to ensure not only that cars are removed from the city, but also that emissions are reduced somehow. So the use of solar panels in the city is quite, well, it's mandatory by law in big buildings right now, for example. They are also planning to reuse water. Water in Spain is also a problem. The water resource is not unlimited in a country like Spain. So also how we reuse water to water the gardens or the parks is something that is in use since a long time ago. So also air quality is a concern, and they have plans. As I said, they created this protected area in the center just to ensure that we have the right quality, and they have strict protocols now to react in case some indicators are higher than expected in some quality air quality indicators. So, and we support them in many of these areas. It's not that we are doing everything. We have a very strong industry in Spain, in environment, in architecture, and in engineering. There will be a lot of work for probably all of them. But what we try is to cover all the aspects from AECOM.
I was also particularly interested in because my research was insufficient, perhaps. I did not know that 49% of the population of Madrid was born outside of Madrid. And you know, while we're talking about physical infrastructure, the demographics of how and where people live and why they choose to come to a city where they weren't born, often relates to education or jobs. Yeah, certainly that's the case in New York.
They are following normal opportunities, as you say, Rick.
So 36% of the population of New York City, not just Manhattan, all of New York City, including Queens, is foreign-born, comes from other countries. I don't have the number in my head about how many people have come from other parts of the U.S. for economic opportunity or education. But, if we were looking at Spain, is there like regional relocation because of economic opportunity or migration from other countries as well?
Well, we have both. I think we have around 20-something% of people that are coming from other countries. And the rest is people coming from inside the country. And the reality in Spain is that we are in a very centralized country. So that means that we have many opportunities in big cities like Madrid and Barcelona. And as long as you move to other cities, it's really difficult to find good, nice, and job offers or opportunities. So at the end, the reality is that many people living in small villages or towns in the rest of the country, at the end, because of the university or because of the job offers, at the end are moving to Madrid. Madrid is not a cheap city to live, but it's where you can have more opportunities. And also Barcelona, the big city. So that's the reason mainly. And it's also warming in terms of welcoming people, because as I said, it's not that everybody feels like they are from Madrid, because half of the people are not from Madrid. So it's quite easy to find an environment and a group of people where you are an inclusive group, because it's normal that everybody's from outside. So that's probably the reason, but for sure it's the job opportunities that are much more in Madrid than in other places.
I have other questions, but I don't want to hog the floor. If there are others, I don't see any hands raised, but is there a question from amongst the students, either about AECOM or the city coming out of the presentation?
In any case, if there's any question afterwards, you can just send it.
Well, one question I have is because when we were in the
there are a couple of hands. Rick, there are a couple of hands.
I see. Lynchie, when I ask you to start, you unmute yourself. Lynn.
Thank you. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your presentation, helping us to know more about Madrid. And I remember you said the COVID control measures in Madrid are kind of risky. And I still want to know, would COVID affect the future development and urban design of Madrid in any aspect, in your opinion? Yeah, and
I said risky because the decisions made by the government in Madrid were different than the rest of the regions. That's the truth. But the numbers are not showing big differences in terms of infections and so on. So for me, when we plan for a new city, we shouldn't forget about COVID. I think COVID has changed a lot the way we should think about spaces, the distance. You know that in Spain, we are very social people. We like to meet and to be together and to be in bars, restaurants, and so on. And that somehow we should plan for different ways of putting people together. At the end, what we have seen is when we have had 6 waves, different COVID waves in Spain at this point. And what we have seen is that when we really thought that this was over and the COVID was gone, October, November, we started to go back to our lives. So we really like to enjoy the open spaces. But one thing that changed in Madrid is that in the past, it was impossible for us to consider to be outside in a terrace in December, 6 degrees, having a beer or something like that. It was impossible for us because we have 9 months of mild weather. So why to be in December outside? Now we have understood that we also can do that with some kind of heating systems or wherever, but the reality is that we have used the outside much more since COVID, and I think this will stay among us in the future. So we were enjoying the outsides a lot in a city like Madrid from March to October. I think now we are extending that from February to November, December, and even in January, you can see people sitting outside. So that's something to consider when you are designing a new concept of neighborhood or city in Madrid, in my opinion. I don't know if this answers your question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for your sharing.
Okay.
Ning Wang, welcome. I know you'll be joining us in the next semester, so thank you for joining us today. And yes.
Thank you, Bill. And thanks you for the professor for the nice presentation. And I want to ask a question from the financial perspective. Since in China the infrastructure status, I mean some like bus station, highways, and they all was can gain money from these infrastructures. So my question is, how about this situation in Madrid? I mean, some company, they maybe constructed the stadium, the highway, the rails, and they could have the operation right in the next 20 years or 30 years and could get the gain back from this project. And finally, if you transfer the right, go back to the local government. So is this the same situation just like in Spain or in Madrid, or the local government will hold all lifelong of the project, or just, like back in China, it have 20 years for the construction company, and afterwards, if you go back to the local government.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think in terms of financial, there's a combination. First, we have the public infrastructures that are normally covered by our taxes, and the governments are paying for that. And that's not just paid by our taxes, but also in a region like Europe, we have European funds. For example, in this COVID situation, Europe has allocated billions of euros for sustainable projects. And that means a lot of injection of money for the countries and the cities, if you can prove that those projects are protecting the environment or sustainable. And that's something very interesting because, for example, the railways have been considered sustainable transportation because it can be used through renewable energies, or even hydrogen can be considered in railways. So railways is eligible for this kind of European funds. It happens the same for every kind of initiative that a city has to transform the quality of the air or the environment, the environmental situation of the city, meaning the contamination and so on. So if you have a project in a city that will transform or improve the quality of the air, it will be also eligible for these funds. And that's helping a lot to the administrations. That's one thing. Then you have the private initiative. And you have private initiative means that they need a return, a quick return, because the return cannot wait for 20 years.
Yeah, sure.
So at the end, private initiative means that they have to sit together with the authorities. For example, in this new huge development in Madrid Norte, they sit down together with the administration and the approvers and the government and say, okay, I understand that you want everything green, but I need some buildings to have my return. So at the end, they found the balance and they found the right solution to compensate the return that the private investor was expecting and the needs that the city had in terms of green areas or sports centers or libraries or these kind of elements. So at the end, the private is also looking for a return that should be closer in time. And at the end, the combination is what's successful. So we don't have, for example, in terms of highways in the city, we don't pay for those highways inside the city. These ring roads are free. That means that it was a public investment through our taxes that was made. And thanks to that taxes, we have this long network of tunnels or these ring roads. But when it comes to develop a new neighborhood like this Nuevo Norte that will be huge, private and public have to be together. That's clear.
Thank you for your answer. And by the way, I just want to ask a question. It's just like in the United States, in New York, we have some publicly traded REITs. It's a nice method for a company to get their return immediately. I mean the REITs, the real estate investment trust. So how about this market situation in Spain? Do we have some like private REITs, public publicity risk or something like this for the company, especially for infrastructure construction companies, since it's really a large amount of money for them to invest and long period to get return. So so in Spain, do we have the same like, I think it's like a tool for a company to get their money return immediately. So how about the risk in the Spain market?
Well, in general, Spain is considered quite stable in terms of regulations. We have adopted the European regulations, and that means that there's protection for a contractor or for a consultant. There's protection in front of an administration. So normally there are clear rules. There's a legal framework that is quite developed in Spain that protects a contractor against a potential bad behavior of an administration, local or regional, and it exists. So legally you can be covered. And of course, there are also insurance companies that can provide you with an insurance, and there are guarantees as well. And also the clients are protected by the public employment law. That means how the public contracts should work. So I think it's quite safe and stable. But that, I mean, the public administration normally pays. It's not that the public administration will not pay. So for a contractor, the risk is there's no risk that they will not be paid by a local administration. The risk could be that they want to change a design, for example, and the final client administration doesn't want this variation order to happen, or this modification, or this change.
Emil, you've had your hand up for a while.
Thank you so much.
You have the last question, Emil Peta.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for a really wonderful presentation and giving us an idea about the overall infrastructure in Madrid. My question to you was, like comparing the cases or the projects of public spaces and infrastructure in USA, they generally have a meeting with the public to determine the design requirements and the requirements for the public, because they will be, eventually it is designed for their use. So there is significant involvement of their inputs and opinions during the design stage. Is there a similar thing? Because as you mentioned that in Madrid, there is like half of the population is not native to the country. So how significant is their involvement during the design of any of the public space?
Yeah, for sure. There's a long process about that. A long process, a quite complete process. There's a public hearing. So in the concept stage, for example, a new infrastructure, you have to prepare your environmental impact assessment together with your feasibility study. You analyze corridors and all things, and everything has to be approved by the environmental authorities and the authorities relevant for that case. But also there's a public hearing process. That means that the project is subject during a certain number of months to everybody that is relevant and wants to say something about the project, including organizations, public bodies, private interests, or you as a citizen. You can always go and ask or suggest, and every single request has to be answered. So that's in every single project. Of course, when you work in big developments inside the cities, everybody has to be on board. The town hall has to be on board. We work like in the States. We have cities and regions. Our regions could be your states. So we have the city of Madrid, and we have the region that is the community of Madrid that has to be in agreement. And at the end, there's the state and the government of the country that has to be also approving some aspects of that development. So everybody's involved, and there's a public process where every single voice is heard and answered.
Thank you for your answer.
Okay.
We're over the time that we set for the presentation. Many other things would want to talk about, but maybe we'll have a chance to do that in person in the future. I
hope so.
very much appreciate, Javier, the time you've taken with us today, not only to talk about AECOM, but to put the work that you're doing there in perspective globally and certainly throughout Europe. I guess my last question is, why Sweden? You know, how did that happen? It's not adjacent.
Well, I many times wondered the same. No, well, it was, I think it was a structural decision. Sweden is a country that has a lot of investments in infrastructure. We have the biggest in Spain, the biggest infrastructure team in continental Europe. And in Sweden, it's almost impossible to recruit or to grow organically. So what we decided, as Spain has a lot of experience in working internationally in projects all around the world, we put together those countries, where is the source of investment in transportation and where are the resources in Spain. So we combine that and we are really working well together, but we are really different.
So it's not alphabetical. Spain is.
No, it's a logic question. I can understand the question.
Well, thank you so much again. Thanks also, Jeff, for lingering, and thanks for all those who asked questions today. We will be continuing the program every morning here in New York this week. Tomorrow, our speakers are Luis Vidal and Ginés Garrido. Ginés will be talking, I think, a lot about Madrid. Luis will talk about whatever he wants to talk about, maybe aviation projects. But today was a very, very good start. So thank you both, and I'm going to sign off and close the Zoom down. Unless Jeff, you have any last comments or questions, having stayed for the presentation.
No, I really appreciate seeing the scope of the work of AECOM, and yeah, I look forward to crossing paths maybe someday with you, Javier.
Of course.
Great. And Feniowski was in and out. He apologizes for having concurrent meetings downtown. It's a very exciting time in New York with a new mayor and lots going on. But I did record the session, and Denise Berger here in New York had also suggested, Javier, that we do a write-up of some sort, or do some social media about the presentation today, which we'll do. Take some photos as well, some screenshots. So again, thank you both. Thanks, Belén in absentia, and thank you all who participated. I'll say goodbye, and until the next time. Goodbye.
See you in Madrid. Thank you.
Yes, I hope. Bye.
Thank you.
Hasta luego.
Bye-bye.